So thanks for inviting me the second time now. I have been here in 2016, and may I ask who already saw my talk in 2016? Okay, 2, 3. Okay, so I will talk a little, or repeat a little what I talked about in Vienna. So today it's all about life energy. The biggest mystery that we have on this planet. And luckily, a lot of people here at the conference talk about this topic from different perspectives. And I'm doing now for nearly 20 years of research about this topic of life energy. And it caught my interest when I heard about Breatharianism, about living on light. So today I will first talk about the strange phenomenon of Breatharianism, of living on light, and then talk about the question, how could it be possible to live on light alone? Or is it possible? And this will include the outer light, the visible light, the physical light, as well as the inner light. So we will talk about meditation as well. 10 years of my research are concentrated in my film. In the beginning there was light. Gabriel already talked about it. I got interested in the topic because I met in 2000 a meditation teacher in Austria, and I learned a special meditation technique, and I was told from other students, do you know that this guy doesn't eat? And I asked him, and he said, yes, I didn't eat for more than a year. I just drank water for more than a year. And of course, this sounded probably like, did you already hear about Breatharianism? Yeah, everybody knows what Breatharianism is? So Breatharianism is this idea that you can nourish yourself without physical food. And just to give a spoiler right away, I don't know to which extent it is possible. There are a lot of stories, and in my film, I show a lot of people who claim that they do not live without food. Some live with little food, some like Pula that we see here, claims that he didn't eat and drink for more than 70 years of his life. And the interesting thing is, you know, when you hear that, you think that's complete nonsense. I did 5 years of research before I even started to do a movie about this. But you can prove yourself anything on the internet. You can prove yourself this is right, you can prove yourself this is wrong. So I wanted to get first-hand information. And Gabriel already told, I'm a filmmaker, so I bought myself a film equipment, and then I could travel around the world for years and look at every lead I get. And I made 200 hours of interviews, and I went around the world, I think, 3 or 4 times, India, Russia, China, everywhere. And I met a lot of interesting cases, and these are not only, there is not only anecdotal evidence, but also scientific evidence. So the most interesting cases we have is Pula. He was studied by the Indian military for 10 and 15 days without drinking, without eating, of course, and also without urinating. Normally, when you do not eat and urinate, you will die after 4, 5, 6 days by self-intoxication. He survived, and the interesting thing is he had blood counts that were in the safe range all the time. So this is a scientific sensation. The longest study we have is on Hiraratan Manik. He's a sun gazer. He does a sun meditation. He looks twice a day, or at least once a day, in the sun. We will talk about that later. They look in the sun, and he does also grounding. The most important things with sun gazing is meditate on the sun and walk barefoot on the ground, grounding. These are the 2 elements. And here Ratan Manik says he can live just by that. We have to understand that here Ratan Manik also says that he didn't eat, he ate a few times in his life. And when we talk about breatharianism, we will see that this is not a matter of black and white, of 0 or 2,000 calories. A lot of these so-called breatharians eat like 100 calories a day, 200 calories a day, 300 calories a day. Now, the interesting thing, what we will see afterwards, is that the actual energy that the body produces equals 2,000–3,000 calories a day. So where is coming the delta from? But we will talk about that later. So I gathered a lot of information. And in 2010, I published then this movie, In the Beginning There Was Light, and it led to a huge controversy in Austria. Gabrielle already said it was one of the most successful feature documentaries in Austrian cinema history, and when it was shown prime time in Austrian television, all the news were full, and in a way I'm proud about this headline in the middle. It's from Bild, it's Germany's biggest newspaper, and they asked, how dangerous is this film? And of course it isn't dangerous, because I always say, please don't do this. Of course it's dangerous if you just stop eating food. I would also never recommend that you jump down a cliff with a wingsuit or go to the Mount Everest without oxygen mask. Of course this is dangerous. What I want to say is that we are all living on light, some more, some less. And my film is dangerous, but it's only dangerous for a certain belief system. It's dangerous for this belief system of materialism. It's dangerous for this belief system that mind, soul, our consciousness are just an epiphenomenon of our biological brain activity, are just a product of matter. And I also want to deconstruct now this idea, this belief system that is believed to be the truth, especially in the science community. This idea that everything, that matter is the basis of everything, is believed to be the truth and nothing but the truth. So if you question this idea, you get in big trouble. And this idea you can question best, and that's why I made this film, because I always say I could have made this film as well about faith healing or acupuncture or homeopathy with exactly the same message. But if somebody is able to live without physical food, then you question this belief system in the strongest way possible. And this belief system that we got told is that we get all our life energy from food, from the calories in the food, by burning glucose. That's the belief system. And funny enough, this belief system is already contradicted by the scientific method, but it's still in our brains. And this belief system comes from the age of enlightenment. Who is this guy left? Descartes. Yeah. Descartes, cogito ergo sum. And Descartes, and I say this with the deepest respect for him, Descartes had this great vision that all natural creation is mechanistic. And Descartes also was a dualist, so he was convinced that all nature works mechanistic, only men are connected via the pineal gland with the spirit area. This is a very Catholic idea. You know that the body is full of sin and quite low, and just the spirit is good. And so they created this idea that bodies are mechanistic, and this picture of the digesting duct shows how they thought how bodies work. Of course, this digesting duct never worked, and still today, science isn't able to produce one single living cell out of dead matter. So we are talking here about the biggest mystery on this planet. And we are consisting out of billions of these cells. And every single cell is full of this wonderful energy, of this mysterious, wonderful energy. And yeah, I'm sure, or I know a lot of people talked about this. And in the 18th century, Antoine Lavoisier, the father of modern chemistry, put forth this theory that the combustion processes in machines are more or less the same as the metabolic processes in living organisms. So you need fuel, you need oxygen, and you produce energy and waste products. And this idea still is in our heads. So we still think we are machines, biological machines. And in the end of the 19th century, this idea was supposedly shown to be true in experiments with the first respirocalorimeters. So you measure the oxygen intake and how much carbon dioxide you put out, and calculate a theoretical amount of energy and compare it with the actual produced energy. And in the arithmetic mean, by then it was more or less the same. So they said, wonderful, we proved humans are machines. Of course, everybody here knows this isn't true, because the formula for the basal metabolism, so how much calories you should need, isn't true for everybody. Everybody knows somebody who eats a lot and doesn't gain weight, and others who eat very, very little and gain weight. So the theory and reality do not fit together. But the idea was so strong that for decades nobody questioned this idea. It lasted until 1972, when 4 scientific institutes dared to ask this heretic question: how much food does man require? And look what they found out. We believe that the energy requirements of man and his balance of intake and expenditure are not known. Because it differs from person to person and from situation to situation. And this is not an esoteric journal, as you know, it's Nature. It's the biggest and most famous scientific journal of the world. And down here you can read the results of careful studies in a number of countries suggest that some people, perhaps through some mechanism of adaptation, are able to be healthy and active on energy intakes which, by current standards, would be regarded as inadequate. And about these people, I made the movie. And I'm still interviewing people, and I'm gathering more evidence. And now I would like to show you a short interview with Ray Mao. Did you ever hear about him? Ray Mao is very interesting because he made an experiment with Israeli television. Whenever people talk about breatharianism, it comes to this experiment with Australian television with 60 Minutes and Jazz Mohin, where they say, oh, that's all nonsense. it was already debunked. And yeah, Jacob, we have here. I don't know if he will talk in the afternoon about this topic, but he has a very interesting history with Breatharianism. So when you do research about this topic of living on light, you will find a lot of people who live on energy amounts who are considered to be impossible by classical science. And so Ray Mao, he made a bet with a millionaire. Because this millionaire said, okay, you know, we know the stories, and Chesmohin already was debunked, and they had to break up the experiment on the 4th day without drinking, so it's all nonsense. And Ray Mao said, I can do this, let's bet for $100,000. So he made this experiment with Israeli television, and it was no problem for him, of course. Then the millionaire didn't want to pay, and he had to get to court, and finally he got the $100,000. And the great thing about Ray Mao is that he's very bright and a very rational guy. He works in computer programming, and that's very important when you deal with these topics, that you don't use esoteric language, because this is already so far out that it helps a lot when you have a guy like this. And I would like to show you a short interview sequence with him, because he says a lot of interesting stuff about this topic. We need some sound, please.
In the first year, I kept a diary of how much calories I'm actually taking. What I noticed is that I take just a few hundred calories every day, and I was experimenting also with some doctors. I was tested, and they said that I'm using 2,000 calories every day just by being, meaning I was tested in a meditation. Apart from that, I exercise every day for about 800 calories a day. Apart from that, I'm active, I do sport, I walk, I work. So supposedly I was consuming or using around 3,000 calories a day, and I was only eating physically 300-400. And the delta, the difference between them, is what explained my logical mind what prana is, what the energy is. It's not only that the body knows how to get used to very little, but it actually opens an ancient old engine of energy that everyone has, but we just need to enable it. I recognize a big difference when you are in nature, when you're surrounded by people who have a lower vibration, meaning people that are very negative, or when you are yourself in an emotional state that is negative, you will become hungry, or you will actually want to eat. You will want to eat because eating is not only about the hunger of the physical body, it's an emotional hunger. In the beginning, I think because I did a whole year without food, I felt a resistance building up. Meaning I felt self-judgment in some way, and I felt that it was too much. And that's why after a year I decided to go back and eat occasionally, because I saw that it's a part of the experience. Now, a lot have changed in my mind over that year. Before that, I was treating food like fuel. You know, you eat on the way, you don't really enjoy it, you don't have the time, you just need the fuel to continue working or continue jogging or whatever it is that you're doing. And afterwards, I started appreciating it, because when I understood I don't really need it, I started understanding that I want it for the flavor, because it tastes good, because of the texture, because of the social aspect of food. I've noticed on my own experience that when I go to the jungle or to the forest, then I don't need anything. Meaning even the habit of taking something sweet or drinking or eating, suddenly when I'm in nature, I feel like I'm surrounded with energy all the time.
He said now a lot of interesting stuff here. So the first thing is that we treat food like fuel. Everybody knows that. Also the energy delta, we will speak about that. So the difference between the energy produced by the body and the energy actually produced. And he said something very interesting in the end, when he's in nature, when he's in the forest. that it's much easier for him. May I ask again, who has seen the film In the Beginning There Was Light? Okay, just two. Because in the film, if you want, I brought a few DVDs if you're interested in the film. In the beginning, there was light. There is a guy, I call him the Alpine Yogi in Austria, and he says something very interesting as well. He says when he's in Vienna, in the city, he needs 2 liters of soy milk in the evening. But when he's in nature, he can live just by air and water. We will talk a little later why we are nourished by nature. First, we will talk now about this delta he spoke about. This guy here is Dr. Paul Webb. He built respirocalorimeters for NASA because in space, it's very important that you know how much oxygen you need, how much carbon dioxide is produced, how much food do the astronauts need, and how much waste products are produced. So finally, the human energy balance had to be measured very exactly, not like in the 19th century, but very exactly with very modern instruments. And he found out that theory and reality just don't fit together, what we already know. He published this in 1980, where he compared a lot of studies, and he said the better you measure, the more you find out that there are amounts of energy not accounted for. So when he compared direct and indirect calorimetry, so measuring how much oxygen comes in, how much carbon dioxide comes out, and calculate a theoretical amount and compare it with the amount of energy actually produced, he found out that in some people, and we are not talking about breatharians, but completely normal people, that up to 23% of the energy were coming out of nowhere. So these are not amounts of energy where you can say, okay, this is a measurement tolerance or anything like that. That's nearly a quarter of the energy coming out of nowhere. And they called it in these experiments unmeasured energy. And for Western science, this is a big problem because it doesn't fit the theory, but for Eastern medicine, it's no problem at all, because in Chinese medicine, they say that the life energy, qi, of course, we take in by food and respiration, but also directly, direct qi. In China, they call it bigu. Breatharianism, living on light, is called bigu fu qi, which means without bread, but through qi directly. And in India, life energy is called prana. Everybody knows prana, the word. And breatharianism is one of the siddhi, explained in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, so that you lose hunger and thirst and just take the prana directly into the body. Now, Western science says that qi and prana is pseudoscience. It's nonsense. And it's strange because they still have no idea what life energy is. And an Ayurvedic doctor said to me, this is very understandable because the big achievement of classical medicine was to break this taboo of dissecting corpses. So this was the big achievement to understand the plan, the mechanistic plan of the human body. But Eastern medicine always was dealing with the living body, so they understand a lot more about the energetic processes in the body. And Wilhelm Reich called it organ, not qi or prana. Who was Wilhelm Reich? Yeah. Yeah, he had a lot of instruments dealing with organ, with life energy, and he was a student of Sigmund Freud, and he asked the question: where comes the energy of our emotions, and also of the name also derives from the orgasm. Where comes the energy of sexuality, of emotions, and so on? And so he came to the question of life energy, and he called it organ, also from organism. And he was actually the first person in the 20th century who dared to bring this question into the scientific discussion. And he had to pay a big price for that. His books were burned twice, first from the Nazis, which was natural because he was a Jew, but then, and this is the incredible thing, then he fled to the United States, and then his books were burned again in the end of the 1950s. It's incredible, because Wilhelm Reich said our science is necrophilic, so they first have to kill life to study it. So if you watch something in the electron microscope, you first have to kill it, make a preparation, and then you can watch it. Of course, you cannot find life energy in there. And Wilhelm Reich then ended in prison and died in prison because he said to the judge that a judge cannot say anything about science, and he didn't want his organ therapy to be forbidden, so he went to prison. The good thing is, Wilhelm Reich was decades or perhaps centuries ahead of his time. The good thing is that nowadays, and this is now very, very fresh scientific research from 2015, that finally we get more and more indications that there is truth in it. So in 2015, they found indications that our power plants, our cell power plants, the mitochondria, is able to transform light directly into energy. And I remember when people said, when I released my film, people said, that's complete nonsense, and we are not plants, there is nothing like human photosynthesis. Actually, there is something like human photosynthesis. And it's not chlorophyll, but melanin, for example, has a lot to do with it. And another interesting perspective, of course, is giving us Gerald Pollack. Who heard his talk? 3? Okay. Yeah. Gerald Pollack is wonderful. He's one of the most interesting scientists, I think, also together with Dr. Korotkov. And he contacted me in 2013 and said if he can have an English copy of In the Beginning There Was Light, and he watched it and he liked it and said, I have an explanation for you how this works, how the energy comes into the body. It's the body water. Because our body water is a very, very special fluid. At the University of Washington, they found a fourth phase of water. So should I talk about it? Yeah. So at the University of Washington, they found a fourth phase of water besides liquid, solid, and aerial. Vapor. And of course, at very high temperatures, there is a fourth phase for all chemical substances, but at normal temperatures, water is the only chemical substance that has a fourth phase. And this fourth phase of water has a different formula and also different physical properties than normal water. The chemical formula is not H2O, but H3O2, and it's negatively charged. And at the University of Washington, they were able to produce a water battery existing just out of water, out of normal liquid water and this force phase. And it's funny, there was another Austrian, Victor Schauberger, yeah? He postulated in the 1920s or 30s that there is water electricity, and they laughed him out. And now finally they found, yes, there is something like water electricity, because this force phase water, it's also called EC water, for exclusion zone water, because it excludes solids. And actually there is this water electricity, and we are bubbles of this force phase of water. Our cell water is this force phase of water. So we are negatively charged. And this was a very important missing link for me in this whole research. Because in my film you will also see a scene in China when I went to the Wudang Mountains, where they have the oldest scriptures about this Bigu tradition. And there was a Kung Fu monk who said to me, you should not practice Bigu in the cities, because for practicing Bigu you need ordered chi fields and a lot of negatively charged ions. And I understood, okay, ordered chi fields, I understood, but why negatively charged ions? I didn't understand that, especially coming from a Kung Fu monk in China. And with the research of Gerald Pollack, suddenly all makes sense. Because in nature, we have a lot of negatively charged ions. Waterfalls full of negatively charged ions. In rooms, you have a lot of positively charged ions. And this is also an explanation why a lot of breatharians, when they are tested, for example, Hira Ratan Manik, he was tested for 410 days, just drinking water, and he lost 19 kilos during that time. So that's still an incredible sensation, but he lost 19 kilos, so it's not nothing. But when we understand that we are also charged by this negatively charged ion, it suddenly makes sense that you underperformed when you are in a room. Because it's like if you would like to demonstrate sailing in an indoor pool without wind. Of course, it doesn't work. So nature is very, very important. And today in the morning, I just was talking with Jacob about grounding. You all know about grounding, how important grounding and walking barefoot is, because the earth is negatively charged. And when you get sick, it has a lot to do with positive charge. And you can Google Clint Ober, for example. He did a lot of research about these topics, about chronic inflammation and how good grounding is, just walking barefoot on the ground. And I told you also, Hiratan Manik, one of the parts of sun gazing is walking barefoot on the ground, because it nourishes you, it makes you healthier. And when we look at clear spring water, for example, or melting water from glaciers, we see this bluish color. It has to do with a lot of force phase water in there, because this force phase water, as Gerald Pollack said, is able to store light. There's a lot of fluorescent particles in there. And this has to do now with another perspective on how living on light works. Biophotons. What are biophotons? Life energy, exactly. Life energy. Did you all hear about biophotons already? Yeah. Okay, not everybody. So biophotons, it's a very weak light emission in all living cells. And when the cell dies, this light disappears. So there is no controversy about that. But the skeptics still say, like with soul, mind, and so on, it's an epiphenomenon. It's not really important, it's coming out of matter, but it's not really important. We know everything in nature is important, and not everything has a good reason. And Fritz, I think this is wonderful. It's a few years ago, they made photos when an egg cell is fertilized. You have a very strong flash of light, because the light of life is coming into the body. And Fritz Albert Popp is one of the pioneers of biophoton research. He's a German, and he continued actually the work of Wilhelm Reich. But he didn't call that organ because he knew what happened with Wilhelm Reich. But biophotons are actually just a sequel of the work of Wilhelm Reich. And Fritz Albert Popp says it's completely naive to believe that these billions of cells are coordinated just by biochemicals. I mean, if you think about that, billions of cells work in perfect harmony to produce this one body. We could not live 1 millisecond if we could do this by ourselves. It's a wonder. It's a wonder because it works with light, and we live in a field of light that harmonizes all this. And the light is a carrier of information. Biophotons, it's not about the strength of this light. The biophotons are very, very weak, but they are carrying information. And the sun is radiating this ordered light, this coherent light. And the plants and indirectly the animals are storing this light, and when we eat, we take this light. He says when we look at the chemical formula of sugar, we divide it into carbon dioxide and water, H2O. Both disappear. We get rid of them. What stays is the light, the information. So Fritz Albert Popp says we are light beings. We live by light. This is the most important part of food, the light and the information that is stored in light. And for Fritz Albert Popp, it's completely understandable that we not always need the food as carrier for this information. But it's possible also to live directly on light, from the outer light and from the inner light. And again, we have to understand that we are made out of millions of beings that work together to produce this one body. And what I also want to promote is to understand that we are not machines, but living beings, that we are organisms, and that we work completely different than machines. Because in the past, the theory was that we are machines and we just need fuel and then we can work and work and work. And it's a good thing that the Nobel Prizes of 2017 and 2016 are now giving credit to this, that we are not machines. Because the Nobel Prize 2017 was for the circadian rhythm, for the inner watch, that we live on rhythms, because the big difference between machines and organisms is that we need rhythms. We need to sleep, we are awake, we need to eat, and then we can digest. And Nobel Prize 2016 was autophagy. This finally freed fasting from this ghetto of religion and esoterics. I remember in the 2000s, all doctors said to me, fasting is either useless or it's not good for your body. It's war against your body. And it's great to see how fast this changed. After the Nobel Prize 2016, finally everybody knows it, that fasting is good. Walter Longo from the University of Southern California says, fasting is the best medicine for your body. Now we know that our body cells age not that fast. It's good to prevent Alzheimer. It's good to prevent cancer. A lot of illnesses. And intermittent fasting, I just in January published a book about intermittent fasting. It's called Der Jungbrunnen Effect, the Fountain of Youth Effect, how 16 hours of fasting change your life. It became the best-selling book in the first quarter of 2016 in Austria across all genres, because it finally frees people. It's so easy. You just don't eat, and it's the best medicine for your body. I mean, it costs nothing. And if you lose this idea that you have to fuel yourself, then it's very, very easy. And a very important part in our book is, I wrote it together with a nutrition scientist and a mental trainer, because it's not only important to understand how important the intermittent fasting part is to boost autophagy, but also to understand that it's very, very easy to enjoy it. And a big part of it is meditation. I'm doing now meditation for nearly 20 years, twice a day, and I'm a person that has a very high addictive potential, so I know what I'm talking about. And I always had problems with it, and I know how good meditation works. And so meditation is a big part in that, and now we are coming more to the inner light. And I would like to tell a small anecdote about GDV. I mean, it's wonderful that Dr. Korotkov is here at this conference. I hope I can be at his workshop tomorrow. Who heard his talk here? Okay, so you know a lot about him. I came into contact with GDV in 2017. And in the beginning there is a scene with a Russian woman. She's quite overweight, and she said she didn't eat and drink by then for the last 7 years. It was in 2017. And I asked her, did you ever go to a doctor, and did they do some experiments with you? And she said, no, there was just one doctor who works with GDV, with the Kilian effect. And in Austria, the Kilian, Kilian photography you only meet as esoteric fairs. But the interesting part was there in Russia, they used it in a normal polyclinic for health prevention. Because, I don't know if Dr. Korotkov talked about this. So you just see if long enough there is a problem in the energetic field in the kidney area, one day it will manifest physically. The big difference is that the physical body doesn't change a lot, or he changes very, very slowly, but the energy field changes very, very quickly. And when I went there, Zinaida Baranova made this measurement, and she had a perfectly rounded energy field, a perfect energy field, no holes. And by then I was there filming. I made sound myself and camera myself. There was the sound equipment and the camera equipment, and you have to check all these technical parameters, and you have to keep the energy in the room and ask the right questions and film from the right perspective. And I'm sweating after such a shooting. So it's also a lot of responsibility, because if you travel to China or Russia and film wonderful things, and then it's all out of focus, or there is no sound of it, you have a problem. So I was quite stressed out, and while filming he said, do you also want to measure your energy field? And I put my fingers there, and my aura was a mess. It was full of holes and catastrophe. And I was talking with him about meditation, and he said, okay, just do a short meditation. So I sat down, did a minute of meditation, did it again, and wow, perfect energy field. And this showed me two things. GDV works, and it's a really great instrument. And the other thing, meditation works. Meditation, who meditates regularly? Yeah. So who doesn't do it, just start a meditation routine? It makes your life better on all levels. And there are so many different ways of meditation. It's not just sitting there and telling a mantra. There are millions of ways to do meditation. And it has all to do with consciousness, with the ordering principle of consciousness. Do you know Dean Radin? Yeah, Alexandra knows everything because she hears it now for the 10th time or something. Yeah. He's really one of the most interesting researchers in this area, because Dean Radin does a lot of experiments about the power of consciousness, and takes very different perspectives, but he takes consciousness seriously, and then that is the most important part. And he says, what is consciousness? Consciousness is an ordering principle. And if this ordering principle leaves the body, it very quickly falls apart into its uninteresting material substances, the dust, like in Christianity. It's only the consciousness that makes the whole thing interesting. And they made a very interesting experiment with consciousness and food. And coming from the idea, does it make a difference if you cook something with love, or if you eat exactly the same thing without love, like from the manufacturer? So they made a double-blind study with biochemically exactly the same chocolate, and one group got this chocolate informed by long-term Tibetan meditation masters with the information that the one who eats it should be healthier, more content and happier. And the other group got exactly the same chocolate without this information. And we have to keep in mind it was a double-blind study, so nobody knew which chocolate they ate. And when they got the results, they found out that the people who ate the informed chocolate were happier, healthier, and more content. And Dean Radin says, if you take this to its extreme case, then perhaps it's possible to live by intention, by consciousness alone. So how can this be possible? So the first thing is to understand, in the beginning there was like, I also show these peer experiments where these mind-matter interaction experiments. This is a whole different field. I also could talk about this a lot, but it's still controversial. What is not controversial is that meditation works on all levels. There are now dozens of studies who show us in all fields how meditation works. It makes your blood pressure better. It protects the telomeres that help you to stay younger. Even the brain changes. After 8 weeks of doing meditation, the gray matter concentration changes. For example, we have here the left hippocampus, the blue. The blue color shows us the control group, and the red color shows us the meditation group. They did mindfulness-based stress reduction, so breathing meditation. They did 8 weeks of meditation, and we had a very significant change in the meditation group, that the concentration of the gray matter increased a lot. At the same time, in the amygdala, the left hippocampus is for our cognitive ability, and the amygdala is for fear. So we had there a completely different effect, and this is something that we see in the symptoms, that you get rid of depression, your subjective feelings of stress go down, feelings of pain go down. So you can do yourself research on that, and probably you already know about this. Where I want to go now is this idea of inner light that evolves while meditation. There is this saying, when we pray, we speak with God. And when we meditate, God speaks with us. And this is now a very, very important difference, that we do not mix that up. Because the perfect order, what we try to achieve in meditation, is something every child knows, every dog knows perfectly to do. Only we lost this ability because we create chaos with our thoughts. So the only thing what we do in meditation is to let go. Thy will be done, not my will. This is what happens in meditation. And we just get rid of this chaos that we create with our thoughts. And then when I said God speaks to us, because a lot of people have a problem with the word God, but we can change this word with transcendence or collective unconsciousness, so it's not important. But down there is a level of perfect harmony, of peace, of happiness, and we just let it in. And this is the inner light. Are you familiar with Kundalini energy? What is Kundalini energy? Tell us. Or perhaps you have an interesting. Just tell us the first one that comes to your mind.
I was focusing on breathing. It was like I was just breathing through the heart, just focusing on that, without any particular thought, nothing particular to focus on. And then suddenly it was in total darkness. So I suddenly had an incredible amount of light appearing, in my perception. It was like I was having the sun just in front of me. And it lasted for some time, and then, oops, some thoughts appeared, and then disappeared. But it was really a wonderful experience.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's why it's called enlightenment. When the snake, it's also called the snake energy, the snake of light, Kundalini energy. And the Kundalini is the divine form of prana. So in the Indian tradition, we have this idea of prana, and that it goes through our body, through the nadis. There are two central nadis, Ida and Pingala, and in the middle there is a sleeping channel, the Sushumna. And in this sleeping channel, the Kundalini energy can awake. And when it goes through all chakras, it's said this is enlightenment. And this idea of the snake energy, it said it sleeps in under the first chakra. And it's funny that we find this in nearly all cultures. We find it in Christianity with the Freemasons, with the Aborigines in China. Everywhere we have this snake energy. And this snake energy had in Christianity quite a bad name. It's a Shakti energy. It's the female form of divinity. So it's said in enlightenment, the female part, the Shakti energy, is married with the male part at the crown chakra. And you know Lilith, the first wife of Adam? Have you ever heard about her? So before Eve, Adam had a first wife that was not made out of her rib. She was very strong, and she didn't listen to him, and she was demonized. So in Christianity, in the Bible, she's a demon. And it has a lot to do with the snake energy. And it's interesting that in Christianity there is a lot of fear when it comes to Lilith and this female, this strong, divine female energy. And we experience the Kundalini energy also in an orgasm. That's Kundalini energy. And you also can experience it. I'm a yogic flyer, and what happens during yogic flying are these Kundalini boosts. And they did research on this. So this is not actual levitation. This is just a photography. But when you experience this, you lose control. It's like a really strong energy boost. But the interesting stuff is that you, or at least I, have never been possible to do this alone. So you can have all these flying mantras and that stuff. It doesn't work alone. It only works in a group. And there's also a lot of research about this, that group meditation is always stronger than when you do it alone. And during meditation, or in retreats, in group meditations, I really had this physical experience of group energies. And this is what they found out when they compared the EEG frequencies from the yogic flyers, that in the moment of the biggest coherence, when they synchronize, then you have this Kundalini boost. And in the Indian literature, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, this levitation is also one of the siddhi I already mentioned. When you looked at the Yoga Sutras at the different siddhi, it's something that everything you read about in a superhero comic is in there. So telepathy, flying, breatharianism, whatever. And Patanjali also says that it's very important that you don't get corrupted by the siddhi. So they are nothing that you should try to achieve for the purpose of the city. The whole purpose of the city is to transcend matter, to transcend the Maya, the big illusion. In the Indian tradition, they have this idea of Maya, you know, the big illusion. You heard about it? Yeah. So the beautiful thing is that modern physics and the Indian tradition now have a bridge, because Amit Goswami, the theoretical physicist, says that the solidity of matter is just an illusion of our senses. And when you understand, I got awarded the prize for the biggest nonsense of 2011 from the Austrian Skeptic Society for my film. And I went there and gave a speech where I said, thank you for all this and for all the promotion you did for me and so on. And I finished with this quote of Max Planck, where he says, as a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms this much. There is no matter as such. We must assume behind it the existence of a conscious, intelligent mind, and this mind is the matrix of all matter. And this is probably the hardest thing for a materialist. And for me, it was very interesting during the research for my film, for In the Beginning There Was Light. Probably all of you learned in school about the atom model of Niels Bohr, and that there are these little balls around the protons and neutrons, and these are the electrons. That is outdated since 1926. But it's the last picture of matter that we can imagine. But actually, matter is nothing than vibrating energy. It's nothing but light. I love this quote from David Bohm, student from Einstein. All matter is frozen light, and if we take this seriously, then we are able to have more freedom if we get into the more densified parts of light or the lighter parts of light. By our choices that we make, by connecting with nature, with ourselves, with our fellow beings, because there are the three sources for unhappiness: separateness from ourselves, separateness from nature, and separation from our fellow beings. And with meditation and contact with nature and contact with our fellow beings, we get more light. And yeah, that's the message which I would like to conclude now. So thanks a lot for your attention.